Today, the Supreme Court decided not to hear the case of Kim Davis. But in spite of the fact that many people view this as an LGBTQ win from the Supreme Court, liberals are still upset about it. Not necessarily because of the decision, but because of what Clarence Thomas said when he was talking about it. So let's start by looking at Kim Davis and find out exactly who she is, because you may not remember her. Back in 2015, when the Supreme Court essentially legalized same-sex marriage, Kim Davis was a clerk in Kentucky. And so that means that she would regularly have to sign and give out marriage licenses. However, because she was Christian, she felt like it was against her religion to sign and give out marriage licenses for same-sex couples. And so if you listen to the media, she would refuse marriage licenses to same-sex couples. That's what we see over and over again. However, that's actually not the case, and it's not really what happened. What actually happened was that in 2015, after the Obergefell versus Hodges same-sex marriage legalization, Davis stopped issuing all marriage licenses. So it's not as if she was picking and choosing and saying that straight people could still get a license but gay people couldn't. She just stopped doing them entirely, which kind of seems understandable where she's coming from. That led to lawsuits, a judge ordered her to issue the licenses, and when she refused, she ended up spending 5 days in jail. Which to me seems a little bit excessive. I could understand maybe firing her for not doing her job because that was her job to sign marriage licenses, and since she had stopped doing that, I could understand getting someone else to do it. But suing her and having her spend 5 days in prison seems a bit extreme to me. Now that was all back in 2015, but today we're still talking about Kim Davis because there are two same-sex couples who are suing her because she didn't sign a marriage license for them back in 2015. That brings us to today, where the Supreme Court essentially decided that they would not hear the case of Kim Davis, saying that she can't be sued because of religious discrimination. So they are essentially saying the lawsuit is able to go forward. And if the story stopped there, many would consider it an LGBT win from the courts. But it doesn't, because Clarence Thomas, even though he agreed with the decision not to hear the case, he said that it was, quote, a stark reminder of the consequences of the court's 2015 decision on same-sex marriage. And he wrote that for himself as well as Justice Samuel Alito. And he continued, saying that because of the legalization of same-sex marriage in 2015, those with sincerely held religious beliefs concerning marriage will find it increasingly difficult to participate in society without running afoul of the case and its effect on other anti-discrimination laws. Essentially arguing that Kim Davis was just one example of this. And so because of this, liberals are upset, saying that, oh, it looks like he's going to reverse the law. Now, before we get into that, I want to point out that he is entirely right. No matter how you think about the decision, it is certainly true that those with religious affiliations are in some way being affected by this. Whether you look at the farm owners in New York who didn't want to allow a same-sex marriage on their property and they were fined $10,000 because of it. Or you look at the Masterpiece Cake Shop where the baker didn't want to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding and his life has since been ruined. Or you look at a florist who is in a very similar situation. The list goes on and on. To me, this is evidence that what Clarence Thomas said is correct. Not only are these people being legally held accountable and being fined a lot of money in some cases, but society as a whole is essentially condemning them as these horrible, horrible people because they have religious beliefs that they hold dear. Regardless how you feel about same-sex marriage, the one where they were fined $10,000 for not allowing a wedding on their property astounds me. Like, do I have to allow anyone to use my property if they want to, or else I can get fined for it? That just seems a bit absurd. But now we get to the part where liberals are actually losing their minds. That's because they believe that Clarence Thomas wants the Supreme Court to overturn the same-sex marriage ruling, as well as many other rulings, as we'll see here in a second. And to be fair, it sounds like he might agree with that. After all, he did say, the court has created a problem that only it can fix. That doesn't necessarily mean overturning the 2015 law, but I can see where he's coming from and why liberals are upset about this. However, as a conservative, if we're looking at overturning any Supreme Court decision, I don't see why you would start with that one instead of, Roe v. Wade, which is significantly more important and consequential. But don't worry, because as this article points out, that is on the chopping block too. As the Supreme Court gets more and more conservative, they say we need to be concerned about Obergefell, which could be in danger, but Roe v. Wade, Griswold v. Connecticut, and Lawrence v. Texas, and many other right to privacy decisions. Now, Obergefell and Roe v. Wade, I'm sure we're all familiar with. I've talked about both of them already. The other two, Griswold v. Connecticut and Lawrence v. Texas, I wasn't really familiar with, so I had to look them up. These two cases allowed same-sex couples to buy and use contraceptives, but also allowed them to engage in private homosexual activity, respectively. Now, if you really think the goal of conservatives is to pack the Supreme Court to get conservatives onto the court so they can ban homosexual activity generally, I don't know where you're coming from. But sure, that's been the plan all along. That's why I vote Republican for sure. They take something that seems a little bit out there and then they make it so much more ridiculous than it is. Somehow equating Roe v. Wade, which is killing a human life, to allowing gay people to have sex. It's not even the same thing. Now, in spite of all of this, there is one last thing I want to talk about I've mentioned previously on my channel, and that is something I don't like because I see the Supreme Court consistently moving further and further from the judicial branch to the legislative branch. What that means is that they're writing laws that they don't really have the power to do. Whether we look at legalizing abortion in Roe v. Wade, or legalizing same-sex marriage, or even what we saw earlier this year, where the Supreme Court essentially changed the definition of sex in the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the Supreme Court is consistently making laws they don't have power to make. And I'm certainly not the only one pointing this out. It seems more and more, as I already said, the Supreme Court is becoming more legislative and less judicial, which is not what it's supposed to do, because it's the Supreme Court. It's the judicial branch. That's where it falls, not the legislative. They don't belong in the House or the Senate. So I guess to sum it up, the Kim Davis Supreme Court decision has made everybody a little bit upset. Kim Davis for sure wanted the Supreme Court to hear her out and she doesn't want to go to jail again or be fined. The LGBT activists are upset that I guess Clarence Thomas wants to completely ban same-sex marriage again, and then he won't stop there. They're going to go for abortion and contraceptives and everything else. So overall, a lot of people are upset by this decision. Now, the Supreme Court can't take every case that comes to it. They have to decide, they have to pick and choose. And I understand that. So I think it's perfectly reasonable where they're coming from. But what are your thoughts on this? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.